Yeah, it's all.
And then just pick a different one. Across.
Can we get here? Let's look right. We got Yorktown. Go back a little bit.
On this slide, but I don't think we've got to like.
I think Roll the Die, got New York.
Yeah.
Cornwallis went to Yorktown. Who was the commander? Yes. Not quite gone, but that's right. Yeah.
Okay, by the way, there have been more, there have been better bluffs before than Washington State have
Better what than war?
better bluffs in the history of war than Washington State attack. Did you know that Napoleon once took a bridge by having two of his commanders pretend and the treaty had been signed and that Bruce had not reached the army?
That one I didn't know, but it surprised me. And so with that, so we had Green. What was the battle where they kind of sucked the British into an attack when they were chasing and just desperate to attack? What was that battle? Guilford Courthouse, that's the flag. We got Camden. Oh, Southern strategy. They believed there were more. The South believed they could go down south, and there were more what down here? Yeah, disastrous failure. You know, they actually created more what by their action down here? Yeah, by going through guerrilla warfare. Let's read Guilford Courthouse. We get to who entered the war? What battle? Yeah. Who is the hero? Ironically, Benedict Arnold, the traitor. And we got to hear where he'd be in this combat here. This is really bloody, nasty. These kind of guerrilla fighting, burning down homes, everything else. So, is this where we quit past Yorktown? Just look right then. Let's go to the next. Big attack on New York. Washington literally called it rolling the die, march to Yorktown. Is that where we quit? The Marquis de Lafayette. Lafayette is on your list. I didn't put him on the slide, but Lafayette was 19 years old when he came to the new United States, attracted by the words of the Declaration of Independence. And he would actually lead the vanguard of Washington's attack, of Washington's troops going into Yorktown. He, the front of it. And later on, he would go become a very prominent member of the French National Guard in the French Revolution, and then barely escaped with his head. Like everything else in the French Revolution, he did come back to the United States in the 1830s, and he was treated like a major celebrity. Like, wow, Lafayette's back. And there was kind of a Lafayette craze in the 1830s. I should add that the park in front of the White House is called Lafayette Park. It was named after him on that trip in the 1830s. The statue there is the statue of the president of that time, Andrew Jackson, in Lafayette Park. Okay, so back to this. Did we mention the uniforms? How they kept white? Did I talk about that? Oh, so they needed lots of French help, French soldiers, and also the French Navy. Because even if they block them off here, the Royal Navy can just sail down and take them out. So the French are going to have to risk a lot. Washington through Rochambeau is going to send word out to the nearest French fleet. Before we get to that, here are two paintings of the men marching. Now, very few of Washington's forces actually have blue uniforms. Very few. They're just rags. And this is what the French wore, kind of tan and white. And the French, better trained, they just, because of a more experienced army, they always look good in their march, while Washington's 5,000 continental forces were just kind of ragged on the march. They're marching through dirty roads, covered with either dust and or mud, because they have to ford rivers and go through swamps. So Washington's army, just look pretty ragtag. But every morning, the French marching through the same swamps and through the same rivers, because there's virtually no bridges, always look nice and white. How were the French able to stay clean? Okay, the French are very French, fashion conscious, right? So the fashion conscious French, you wanna know how they did it? Now, the thing about it is they're wool uniforms. And you can't really wash, there's no dry cleaning services along the way. But how they did it? They carried pouches of talcum powder. White talcum powder, and they would put it on the uniform, put it in, so they look white the next day. Clean was wrong where they looked white. And then, of course, if you hit French soldiers, kind of. But they marched there. They got to Yorktown. The problem is the fleet. And we're coming to, okay, it's not really a battle. Yet everyone calls it the Battle of the Chesapeake Peaks. Chesapeake Capes, I'm sorry, and it's basically this little, right off the Cape of Chesapeake Bay. And the thing was, the French, or the navies at that time, European style navies fought with lines just like the land armies did. And the big ships that would fight this would be called ships of the line. A little bit later on, they'll be called battleships. And here is a picture of French and British battleships faced off, and they would literally line up and sail with the wind and blaze away at each other. And these ships of the line were the big, top-heavy sailing ships. They might have 2 or 3 decks with up to 100 cannon on them. They're actually really top-end. Storm, they just flop them over. And they have really big keels. And they just would blaze away at each other till one side broke off and ran away, or their ship started being damaged and they would be boarded. Every ship is going to have naval infantry. And they're going to be that for one purpose, to snipe at enemy ships and then board them. The United States had them too, and the new United States Navy is pretty few ships. They're called the Marines. It's okay. It's called the Marines. And that's where the Marines come. They're actually part of the Navy. Don't tell them that. They get a little bit hurt. Actually, do tell them. It's fine. But moving on. Well, these are the ships of the line. The French have a few. The British have a few in the New World. Now, the British, they're kind of spread thin. So the French roll the die and spend a few more. Second time I've used that today. The French fleet in the Caribbean, what is today Haiti, then Santo Domingo, had 24 ships of the line. So they reinforced their fleet. The British, they had more in the Atlantic, but it was separate. 12 in New York City and 13 in the Caribbean, Kingston, Jamaica. Together, the French have the British have them outnumbered. And most of the fleet actions, I'm not kidding, they would just kind of sail by each other and they'd be like, oh, you're bigger than me? Okay, I leave, you win. Just accept it, they're not going to win. So the British have an advantage, but they have to combine the fleet. So through Rochambeau, Washington sends down to Santo Domingo to Admiral de Grasse, the French commander, begging him, please come up and blockade, risk your fleet and blockade before the British can combine their fleets and do it. De Grasse does it. He sends his entire fleet north to the Chesapeake Capes. The fleet from New York sails down, but the fleet in Kingston stays. They're fearful something might happen to them, and that would put at risk all these sugar colonies like Jamaica, Bermuda, Bahamas. What are they afraid of? It's this time of year. Hurricanes. Because of hurricane season, the British don't risk their fleet. The French do. The Battle of Chesapeake Capes is literally de Grasse's fleet sails by the Admiral Graves is the British commander. They kind of sail by, and Graves realizes them outnumbered, and he goes back to New York, and now they're besieged in Yorktown. Cornwallis can't escape. This could be a major victory. The hurricane season is kind of amazing. Yes, what hurricane is on its way to? It's hitting Cuba right now. Yeah, Hurricane Ian. Right now, it could be Category 3 or Category 4 hurricane. We're talking about evacuating coastline, they're moving sporting events, yeah.
I guess it still live there.
Where? In Florida? Or where?
Yeah, in like the area that always gets freaked over like hurricane.
We wouldn't have, it would. What is it, about eighth of the population? That's a lot of people, yeah.
Okay, here's a thing.
Mhm.
Didn't they have a naming system where they could only be? names?
That used to be,
And then we had so many hurricanes that they just gave up.
no, it wasn't quite like that. It really was a conscious effort to have male and female names that would alternate. But now it's just, yeah, there's so many more hurricanes. But then it was just a conscious decision not to make names only female. But there's a typhoon, which is another name, essentially a hurricane, already in Vietnam at the same time. So it's hit the Philippines. Back to this. Speaking of hurricane season, now Yorktown is besieged. Washington's men tried to take it by storm, but they built pretty good fortifications there. Here is the British fortifications, and the key parts are protected by what's called redoubts, which are another kind of big, they dig big dirt, burns, and protect it. And if you go there today, Yorktown is still there. You can walk these trench lines. It's really well preserved. And then it literally connects right to, they're still there, Confederate trench lines from 1862 through 1865. And it's all part of the National Park Service. So it follows this trench line to the southern part of the peninsula, which is Jamestown, the first colony. All right here. And then Williamsburg, which is the colonial capital, which is like stepping into a time zone, is right about here on this map. So it's one of those, if you get a chance, go. It's pretty amazing. The Park Service does a great job. Well, they start to shell it. The American cannoneers, they couldn't hit anything. So they really didn't have a lot of training. The French were much more accurate, but they just kept a constant pressure on him. Cornwallis realizes he is surrounded. And they slowly began to dig trenches closer and closer to the British lines. There are a couple of British redoubts, forts right here, that were stormed and taken. One of them would be led by Washington's adjutant, and an interesting man in a lot of ways, a guy named Alexander Hamilton. And that would fall, and Hamilton's an interesting man. The play has very little to do with reality, by the way. But moving on, yes, there's a guy named Hamilton. But has anyone seen the play? A few, yeah. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. Not very true. But Hamilton was kind of a scoundrel. Moving on. Cornwallis had no choice but to surrender. We will come back to Hamilton. You never escape Hamilton. Cornwallis would surrender. And this was a humiliating defeat. No, this is not the main British force. The main British force is still in New York. But the British, they're already making the decision. We are going to probably lose. What is it called where you lose? Or the kind of strategy where you make the enemy suffer so much, you kill so many, they can't fight anymore. Yeah, that's attrition. And so, at the surrender ceremony, this creepy, the mountain valley. Look at the mountain valley. I hate this mountain valley now. I asked them if I could change the mountain valley to something else, and they told me no. They're all out to get me. So Cornwall, one of the things he would do is the surrendering officer would present his sword. And Washington gave him pretty favorable terms and negotiated agreement. Basically, you stack your arms, we'll let you get on Royal Navy ships and get out. No more bloodshed, we won. And Cornwallis was so humiliated, he did not go. So he sent his adjutant to present his sword, not Cornwallis's sword. And his adjutant doesn't go to Washington. Washington's standing here, he goes to Rochambeau. The French come in. He brought his friend to the French. But Rochambeau just shakes his head and points to Washington. Now Washington, congratulations. Washington is furious. What a slap in the face. He shakes his head and points to his second. So that's how they surrender. I do think that's funny, that little bit of gamesmanship. This guy named Benjamin Lincoln. But in this picture, the creepy red-faced twins are Washington and Lincoln. That's why I showed you that one. And, oh, we're jumping right here. So, almost immediately let's talk about the peace treaty, and of course they're going to meet in Paris. But while this is going on, Washington has to keep its army intact. All these kind of questions. Is the United States going to be truly independent? Land, fishing rights, what about loyalists? All this stuff has to be decided. And Spain, France, and the Netherlands could care less about the new United States. They fought Britain because they wanted to get Britain. While this is going on, we have what's called the Newburgh Conspiracy. Washington still has to keep his army intact. Yes, there's still French soldiers, but they're right about here, watching the main British force under General Clinton at New York. So they're still there. The British would not leave New York until 1784. So they're sitting right here. If Washington's army collapses, Britain can still win. Or the colonies could break apart. Who knows what might happen? Well, the Continental Congress has no real money. They're printing currency, but they have no power to tax. And if a government cannot tax, their money has no value. Nobody will trust it. Same thing is they can't borrow. Governments, if they can't tax, can't borrow money because nobody thinks they'll pay it back. So the Continental Congress is telling Washington's army in Washington, we promise we'll pay you. We promise. And they send them letter after letter after letter. And so the Continental Army in 1782 promises pay. Robert Morris, kind of just by default, is going to be, I don't know if I would say the Treasury Secretary, but there's no Treasury yet. He's a financier. He makes money off borrowing, or I'm sorry, by loaning money, by charging interest, buying and selling of money. Finance. Not really making anything. By the way, he's getting rich. He sends word, oh, this is Morris right here. Oh, he's doing fine. We promise we'll pay you. We'll give you government bonds that will pay back down the road, and we'll give you land. And the Washington's men, especially his officers, don't trust him. And they begin to grumble that this government is going to collapse. We're going to lose everything. I made all these sacrifices while they sit in Philadelphia and like Morris get rich. And therefore, they wanted Washington to march on Philadelphia, remove the Continental Congress, and make himself dictator, which of course meant king. That's what they wanted Washington to do. Washington will care for us. We can trust Washington. And Washington realizes if the British hear about this attempted mutiny, the whole thing could fall apart. They're negotiating in Paris. The British army is still in New York. Sure, there's no major battles, but so Washington goes to this little place in Connecticut. Basically, it was like a tavern. And think about the tavern more just this big open room where people would eat and meet. And Washington was going to try to talk to his officers. Please don't mutiny. If the British find out, it's over. And so he gave a speech. This is a copy of the speech. Gentlemen, he talks about pay and money and sacrifice. He got up to talk to them, and they're sitting crammed into this building. It's cold. They're crammed in, shoulder to shoulder. And Washington, I mean, he could feel the anger, he said, like waves of just fury. He knows they're angry. So he gets in and picks the letter up and kind of starts reading the letter, gentlemen, and reads a few words, and they don't listen. They don't listen at all. They're just mad. They don't care. So he stopped. And the way he stopped caught their attention. So they're grumbling and they're watching. And he goes, excuse me, man, just a second. Reaches in his pocket and pulls out reading glasses. Now, Washington had this aura of kind of indestructibility. He nearly killed many times. He seemed to be this leader they could count on. And he pulled out this reading glasses, put them on, and said, men, This one was hard. They all had to make sacrifices. And then he started to read again, and everything changed. He read about one sentence and he looked up and they were all. You look at what he had sacrificed, we could do a little bit more. And he didn't even finish reading the letter. It ended right there. Ended right there. Washington walked out. Here's a picture of it. Washington meeting his men afterwards. And then when the war ended, he went home and gave up power. It's kind of remarkable. Washington has a lot of flaws. There's people out there that have flaws, including Washington. But this truly was a pretty amazing affair. And what a great bit of play act. He realized it, pulled the glasses out, and just he got him and sucked him in. Sure, he needed him, but it's pretty sharp. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So the conspiracy ended, and the Treaty of Paris would finally be negotiated. John Adams and Ben Franklin would be the lead negotiators. They couldn't stand each other. And this painting, I should have made a little bit bigger, but they sat down for a picture. There's Adams and there's Franklin. They just couldn't sit next to each other, so they never finished the painting. So that's it. Yeah, Franklin thought Adams was this kind of a lunatic, up and down, yelling and screaming, like happy the world's going to end at the next breath. Really flighty, kind of prudish. Well, Adams thought Franklin was a degenerate. He thought Franklin was using his fame to take advantage of French society, going to these salons. He'd be the toast of the town. All these French women would follow him around. He probably had many different affairs. And he would do weird things, like Franklin would like to walk around the streets of Paris bare naked. And Adams thought, and I agree, that's a little weird. But they were able to negotiate a secret for the treaty, U.S. independent. All land east of the Mississippi. Okay, Florida went back to Spain and Canada remained British. The United States got, remember, George Rogers Clark, when he made that trip to here, gave the United States a claim. So the size of the United States, well, overnight, it's a massive country. Can they hold it? I don't know. The loyalists are promised their money back. They would get protection, and those who lost money or farm or property, whatever it might be, they would be compensated. And lastly, this area, they all knew would be really vulnerable. The mountains divided the East Coast from the interior, so they need the Mississippi River. New Orleans. New Orleans was under Spanish control, and they have to be able to have trade go through New Orleans, or they could lose all of this. And there would be many times where there would be attempts to break this away and form separate countries. So it was a pretty shaky thing. You think about this being inevitable? No. There are a few other things like fishing rights, right here, things like that. Now, that's treaty. It would eventually be signed, and thus the new government be created. Washington did give up power, go back to Mount Vernon, but would be soon disgusted. And on that happy note, that's it. So your desk will say that. No, that is with it. So the test will end right. Treaty of Paris of 1783. On your review list, I will answer any question you have. Yes. Oh, thank you for mentioning it. I forgot to mention it in this class. Abigail Adams. So Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife, incredibly intelligent person. And you're one of those, though, because especially with upper class or upper middle class women, they have very few political or legal rights. Working people, women had a lot of power economically. A lot. Families could not survive, men and women. But back to Abigail Adams. She wrote her husband during the run up to independence. Yeah, exactly. That's what she said. Remember the ladies, and when you're talking about unalienable rights and all men being created equal, and because Adams wrote her a letter kind of talking about what direction they're going, if we really are going to stand for liberty, shouldn't it mean for everybody? Shouldn't men and women have the same right? Now, Abigail Adams thought women's property should property should vote like men with property should vote. And John Adams greatly respected her and said, you're right, you're absolutely right. No. But you made a great point. And so the point is there was already a realization that a significant part of the population were being ignored, like Abigail Adams, but nothing was. I should add, a lot of states, though, did allow women with property to vote well into the 1820s, and then that was taken away. If you believe rights, once people have rights, it's permanent. That's not what history tells us. Rights can be taken away, and it happens all the time. It's a fight. It's a continuous fight. Another question. Anything on that? Yes. Oh, George Rogers Clark went to the Mississippi River, basically to drive out the American Indians that were helping the British and the other plantations. Another one. Yes. Okay, the Townshend Act was passed in 1767, and that was after the Stamp Act failed. And they tried to lower the taxes from the Navigation Acts, but enforce them with a quartering act, and led to another boycott, and that would lead to the Boston Massacre. Yes. You have to what? Yeah, right there. Any others? Yes.
Racism start, like, what would we fight about?
Okay, so this is what I did. I think I was wanting to make sure that you didn't forget about that. So I'm just gonna ask Bacon's Rebellion.
Oh, okay.
And then, well, there's my big hint, Bacon's Rebellion. And the Bacon's Rebellion, what it came out of Bacon's Rebellion, tied up to racism. Is that for me? Yeah, they go hand in hand. Remember Bacon's Rebellion, slave codes, hand in hand. What about this? You kept it secret.
This was doing it like 30 minutes ago.
What is it for? What is it?
I can't log into college for it. So I'm going off my counselor.
You want to do it says we can meet, you want to do the review for something? Yeah, I'll finish the review so you miss anything. Anything else? Other questions? Yes. So Pontiac's Rebellion, that's in 1763, and that was after the French and Indian War ended, and tribes in the Old Northwest attacked British forts. And the British would respond. They don't want another war. They respond with a proclamation of 1763 that limited colonial expansion. Yes.
Siege of Boston.
Siege of Boston, that's in 1775, and that's after Lexington and Concord, where the militia surrounded Boston, and they got cannon from Ticonderoga. And the big thing about that is when the British left, they couldn't push them out Bunker Hill, kind of proved that. Boston, when they left, combined with the King's proclamation saying they're all going to be disavowed as traitors. Remember I told you that story? And Lord Dunmore's proclamation in Virginia about freeing slaves to help Britain. When those three things happened, that would push them in Philadelphia to, what the heck, let's declare independence. So I'm going to ask you about the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to make you answer two short IDs on the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to give you three choices. One choice, equality. One choice, social contract. One choice, unalienable rights. And I'll give you one more choice. The reasons they declared independence. And I just gave you the three reasons. You know, finally pushed them over the top. Boston Proclamation, Lord Dunmore. I'm giving you a lot of information on this one. As the year goes by, I'll give you less hints about the short IDs, but eventually you just have to know. Yeah, which is fine. You know, easy for me to say, yes. Yeah.
But I don't know, we don't need to.
Well, I was going to give a test on that first day of the summer assignment, but I did because we had that assignment.
Yeah,
So
so, okay,
I won't have anything this summer
it
assignment.
doesn't.
Yeah, that was one, but remember we had the assembly, so you guys missed the period, so I thought I want to get everything out of whack. I thought about giving it a take home and then I decided not to. Where were you? You yank your teeth? Good. That'd be a fun thing for after the test. Do you agree? They could clamp you down. I have hammers and a hammer and a chisel. Keep good? Good. Any other questions? So we know, yes. All you need for the war is for empire. The big thing though is a continuous fight between the British and the French. And the war for empire, you have to know is French and English. Yeah, that was one. How much I really want you to know, and I just thought, think about it. So I know that King William's, Jenkins here, Queen Anne, yeah. That was Ben Franklin's plan to unify the colonies based upon the Iroquois and also, but it failed because the colonies were so bitter. The reason why that's important is they needed a common enemy to stamp at Congress and be British policy. And only 11 years later. Another one. Anything, I will answer it all. So, anything else? Yes. Any others? Yes. Okay, Common Sense is, they're both pamphlets by Thomas Paine. And the Common Sense basically said that push the US towards independence. Why should we follow a king because of luck of birth? American Crisis, Washington would read that to his troops before Trenton. And these are the times that try men's souls, to try to encourage them to fight. Any others? Any others? Good list. I'll answer any one. Yes.
For the Washington, would you write about like how he started the French Indian War and then became the leader of the.
For Washington, good. Thank you for asking that question. Now, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to ask one on Washington. I know there's a multiple choice about that. The big thing is about what he did during the war. So how he, didn't necessarily win battles, but kept the army together. He, the Newburgh, the conspiracy was a big deal, keeping, diffusing that, and giving power to him. Yeah, that's a tough one. Thank you for asking, because that could have been really good. Yes. So the Declaratory Act was after the Stamp Act, and it basically said that Parliament is still in charge. And so they could tax, leading to the Township Acts. We are still in charge. Is there another one? Yes. John Locke wrote 2 treatises on government. The big thing about John Locke, he is an English philosopher at the beginning of the Enlightenment who would write that people have natural rights, life, liberty, and property. And talked about the social contract. And Jefferson would really use Locke. He loved John Locke. Loved John Locke. Life, liberty, and property. And Jefferson would change it to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Well, he didn't change it. Another philosopher would that Jefferson copied. Nothing wrong with copying in that situation. Why reinvent the wheel? Did you see NASA shot a rocket into a asteroid?
Yeah.
And that'll be on the test too.
Bonus
Bonus question. You have to do the mathematical formula for the trajectory.
Yeah.
Is there another one? Yes. So that's the proclamation that limited colonial settlement on the Appalachian Mountains because of the Pontiac Rebellion, but the Southern colony or the colonists just went nuts. And that's one of those things, whenever they talk about every tax, and it always like, we hate the Stamp Act, and remember that proclamation. We hate the Tea Act, and remember that proclamation. Any others? Any others? Yes. So the first Continental Congress, that would be after the Coercive Acts. And they would ratify the Suffolk Resolves, which said, that was from Massachusetts, that said a militia and the boycott. And so that it's kind of the beginnings of a colonial government. But the big thing about the Continental Congress is, set up that militia that would lead the Lexington and Concord. And then they said, we'll meet again in May of 1775. Lexington and Concord happened, and so when they met again, that would be the Second Continental Congress, and that's the really big. That's the one that would do the Olive Branch Petition, the Declaration of Rights and Grievances. Who did they pick as commander? And then they immediately allowed them to fire Washington. They would become the de facto government for the colonies. They would declare independence. They would write the first form of government called the Articles of Confederation, and they would ratify the Treaty of Versailles. So that's the Second Continental Congress. That is what, when I went through that without being asked, that is what we call in technical terms. You might want to grab your desk when I tell you this. A hint. Yes.
British.
Another really important one where the British thought they could, see, the French entered the war, gonna be hard to hold here. Well, let's go down south, rally loyalists here, defeat the Patriots so they could hold on to the South. But it was an absolute disaster because they created more enemies, more guerrillas, culminating in Guilford Courthouse. I do love that. Yes.
On our, on the answer is that we keep, but if we're answering for an event, how do we provide an example of them?
So if the event is something that happened, you give an example of something with the Southern strategy, what happened during it. So like, for example, the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, or Francis Marion the Swamp Fox and the guerrillas would fight against. So give an example of a person who did it, a place, or an event.
Okay. And
Yeah, that's the great thing about short ID, you'll get partial credit. If you got that part right. You know, unlike multiple choice where you miss it, you miss it. Short ID, you can still get credit even if you don't know it exactly, as long as you write down good facts and good details, you get some credit. We should all like essays. Yes, I know they're more work, but nothing wrong with that. You want to work, right? I can tell by your faces.
A lot of that's been fed to us.
Any other? We'll save that one for another short down the road. Any others? Any others? So I went through it. So I mentioned Bacon's Rebellion. I gave you a hint about, you know, there's some really big ones. Bacon's Rebellion will be one of your choices. I went through the short IDs for the Declaration of Independence, you know, people, place, events for examples, and don't forget, do not forget what it led to. So Southern strategy was a disaster, and that would culminate in Yorktown and the British defeat there. What it led to, and what it led to is not peace and happiness and everybody led a life of fulfillment and joy. No, something specific. Yes. Yeah, 4,000 multiple choice and 74 short IDs. And a diorama. You gotta make a diorama. It's a big play. There'll be 24 multiple choice and 5 short IDs. So I'm gonna have the test. Literally, you walk in, you have your own paper. I tell you, I shouldn't do this, but I'll let you have line to paper.
Do you do that? How about you do that? Wait, they let us have lines on the. I'm so confused. So it was so worried. I wasn't worried. I was just on the last safety test, they let us have.
Okay, no lines. I'm tired of no. Just joking. Oh, pencil, pen or pen, but blue or black pen. No red pen, no white pen, no plaid pen. I am old and relatively befuddled, so do not use light colored pens. Second semester, though, we have to write everything in pen. We as in you. Because the AP exam has to be in pen. We just got used.
Why did they do?
The big reason why is pen, when it dries, it doesn't smear as much as pencil. Pencil, you know, they pack them away and they send them, and it really smears back. That you have a reason. Pen's easier to write with. It really is. You don't have to press down as hard. the problem with pen is, I don't know if you know this, but sometimes people make mistakes out there. We don't in here. If you make a mistake with a pen, just one line through. Don't do what I always would do. Rah! More questions? B, move on. The next unit. Take your notes out. Let's go. The thing you're gonna like about this is there's no option until we get after the AP exam. And then what is it? What are we gonna do after the AP exam? Fitness. Nothing but wall sits and bar hangs. So half of you be lined up in the hallway doing bar sits or wall sits. Whoa. And the other half will be hanging from a bar. And then I'll say switch. You're right. And then the time miles. 4-minute mile, right? If you don't make it, you keep running until you make it. That's science. Yes. We didn't get any loose ends. There's always a last part of history, like the 90s through the 2000s, we don't get to. Yeah, but it won't be, there'll be a little bit, but not as intense. And then anytime after that, yeah, like in the past, we've done, like last we watched a couple movies, I had a little time with it, we watched kind of historical movies, kind of went through that. It's actually a really fun way to end it. Got a couple different choices of the movie. I watched something I hadn't watched in class before. So. It's about time you left.
Yeah, see you tomorrow, Mr. Parky.
Doesn't it sound like a threat? And one more thing, if you haven't logged into the AP thing, log in. If you do not log in, you haven't logged in?
No, I have a question. Do we like register for the tests on our own, or is it something we do?
When you log in, you just automatically log in and after pay and after to register for the test, you got to.
Oh, okay,
So don't just log in and get on into the system.
okay, so if we're like in there and have your class.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
And just leave like a credit card number and you just keep going.
Okay.
Then I'll pay for, I'll take it. Don't do that. Filming, we're acting like, okay. Let me shut the camera off and I'll show you. All right, so with that, by the way, isn't this funny? They couldn't finish a picture because those two were so mad at each other. I'm glad Franklin's cloned. So the founding of the Republic, and the founding Republic is going to be 1783 until about 2025. No, about 1815 or so, after the War of 1812, kind of this gray area. And this is the very famous painting of the Constitutional Convention, where they're all meeting in secrets. They thought they might be accused of being traitors, but it barely made it. And one more thing to understand, yes, they're going to create the Republic, the Constitution is going to be written. This is pre-capitalism. This is pre-industrial revolution. This is not our world yet. It would make no sense to us yet. And I'm going to emphasize this a lot. Don't forget that. They're creating this thing. They don't know what's coming. Okay, they've heard about these strange power looms in Britain, but they don't know how the world's literally going to blow up. They have no idea what's coming. So, post-war United States, I like this one. So here's Lady Columbia, also Liberty, and then American Indian. This is a newspaper title in a paper in Philadelphia. Remember that kind of dichotomy about American Indians, liberty at the same time wanting their land. So, Republicanism, government by representation, because they feared a strong central government. They wanted more power in the states. So it's very decentralized. The states have more power. And this seemed like a good idea because of that tyranny of King George III. And every state would pass some kind of Bill of Rights, copied after the British one, and kind of fitting that with that Enlightenment idea of natural rights. Now, the Enlightenment's all over the place. Oh, this is kind of an interesting one. So this is Philadelphia. $4 reward. This was cut off and of course runaway slaves. Liberty. There's lots of contradictions going on here. There's a massive economic depression. Post-war, there's no real financial system. Every state has their own currency. Cities have their own money. It's kind of chaotic. And one more thing, the people who came out of this war, average people, working people, especially white men, are thinking we have a voice in government. Well, we're skipping a lot of people, but still a very radical idea of more democracy. When I mean democracy, I mean people having more right to choose their leaders and a greater voice in government. And many of them were levelers. They wanted leveling. What does leveling mean? Leveling, yeah, the classes. Okay, some of you might think of this as relatively close to socialism. There were people who called themselves socialists, but socialism is another creation of the Industrial Revolution. Heck, everything's a creation of the Industrial Revolution, including this dry eraser pen. So with that, and it's a lot different than what people like John Adams or Sam Adams, or for that matter, George Washington thought it would be, because they didn't like this. So the government that's going to be created, the Articles of the Confederation. Sometimes you see this called the Confederation, a loose affiliation of states. The Second Continental Congress would write this in 1777. And it's important to understand this is at a time just after New York fell and Philadelphia is about ready to fall, right before the Battle of Saratoga. Technically, it took power in 1781, but in reality, after the British left in 1784. And it's weak by demand. And don't forget, this is a creation of the wartime fear of British tyranny, and now they're kind of stuck with it. It really wasn't thought out what they needed. It was just like, we don't want tyranny. No tyranny. Did it go backwards? How did I do that? Okay, so Congress, each state had one vote. So this is copying the Continental Congress. So they could send as many representatives as they wanted. So Philadelphia is where the Continental Congress first met. Pennsylvania would just send a mob of people. But they only had one vote. So all the representatives from Pennsylvania would have to get together and they would vote. That's called a caucus. Then they would get that one vote. Georgia sent one guy most of the time. He had just as many votes as the mob from Philadelphia. And so, one vote. Does this favor big states as in population or small states? Small states. The legacy of this still exists today. And last thing for today, it took 9 votes to pass a law. So they want to make sure that some states could basically veto. But that means only 5 states. I'm kind of pointing out southern states. Meaning, what kind of laws are going to be passed if you need a supermajority to pass? A better question. That favors the South, but also the North. Meaning, what kind of law? Not very many. If you need something to be done, it won't be done. I did record this. And I know you've only got half the class, but in this first one, I just finished the oral review. If there's gonna be 3, I'm gonna take most of the after. And then 2, the declaration of independence. So I remember I went through this, social contract, unalienable rights, equality, and then the reason they actually declared what happened. Yeah. You bet.